You're listening to Airey Bros Radio. Be there or be square, because it's all killer, no filler.
Empowering the individual. Like, this power is in you. It's not necessarily in the fancy things you buy. The theory right now is that MDMA lowers blood flow to the amygdala, which is where our fear responses come from. Normal doctors aren't necessarily, or researchers even, aren't necessarily going to go to the ravers to find out what their situation is and how they made it work. I think there's just a lot of value there. If it wasn't a shit show once in a while, like, was there really growth? It kind of has to be hard once in a while. Otherwise, like, you know, old things need to die for new things to get some space, to get some traction. There's some researchers talking about dosing with Prozac, a single dose of Prozac. And what could happen, Prozac will block the uptake of serotonin back into circulation. Like, it'll just keep it in free flow a little bit. And that theoretically matches the dip in serotonin that's happening post MDMA. We still need to do some testing. I'm not advising anybody try this. I'm here to be dangerous so you could be safe. This is Joe Moore, and you're listening to Airey Bros Radio.
You said 8 years, and since I've been peeking back in every now and then, it looks like you guys have a lot of stuff going on. As far as there's some retreats, I feel like there might be another host or two that kind of does some shows for you. I know you guys have some programs, so wherever you want to kind of start, where you've been, because I think we're getting ready to transition out of the full-time day job the last time we talked to you.
That makes sense. That was right around the end of, I think I got laid off from my software job right before COVID hit. They gave me a bunch of money. I had a bunch of powder days, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm doing psychedelics full-time now. So then I jumped in. Yeah, and that was right around that same time period. So we started May 2016. We had no real intent of a business or making money. We had, just wanted to push some ideology around transpersonal psychology, Stan Grof, holotropic breathwork, stuff like that, to help, push back against the over medicalization of stuff here in psychedelia. This can't purely be medical. This can't purely be scientific. It's got to be a little more human. Yeah, and that's what we did. Yeah, like shortly after we, got through COVID a little bit, we started teaching this program, Vital. We wanted to compete with MAPS and CIIS and the big dogs in the training arena. And we thought we could do, as good, if not better. So that's kind of where we jumped in. And it's a 12-month program. We're making it more inclusive than a lot of these other programs. So therapists can join, doctors can join, but also yoga teachers, massage therapists, college grads, college students, people with a professional interest in the space, like accountants or graphic designers, could do well coming in. And it's more like a transformational education thing is one way to look at it. And also like a liberal arts degree almost in psychedelia. Because nobody as of today can really tell you at the national or international level, you're a, grade A psychedelic facilitator and you're allowed to do this. Like, nobody gives you a license to trip like MI5 or something, right? It's like, you got to kind of hunt around a little bit and find where you fit in. If it's like a for-profit biotech or like a retreat company, or, you just want to do this stuff kind of low key with your friends. So that's kind of what we did there. And that's been the bulk of our project. We also, brought on some new hosts. We've, launched a new show. We have a show called Hyphae Leaks now, which is kind of like a sort of an activist Oakland-ish take on psychedelia, which is really, really fun to have contrarian viewpoints to everything you're going to read about in psychedelia. Yeah. And then that's a cool one. That's Reggie Harris from Oakland Hyphae and Mary Carrion, who's written for all sorts of big publications, Rolling Stone, etc., I think. And that's really awesome. And we got a new host, Johanna, who's been with us for a bunch of years. She's in the UK. She's from Finland originally, kind of Carl Jung scholar, but really, expert here. It's one of our most valuable assets on the team for sure. And then who else? Victoria Decker has done a bunch of podcasts for us. Alexa Jesse has done a few. And we want to keep growing and make this a global conversation, not just a niche American conversation. Because, on occasion when America's not leading, it's dragging. So like, how do we learn from the whole planet and, keep things evolving everywhere. And that's kind of our path, and probably see more shows popping up for specific regions. And yeah, interesting other ways to engage with us, like retreats. Yeah, done so many retreats as part of Vital. Got one coming up in January. Anybody's welcome to join us with. It's kind of a breath work, movement, functional fitness, and psychedelic training retreat. Yeah, so no psychedelics at the retreat, but a lot of talk of psychedelics and a lot of NOS, like non-ordinary states. Yeah, just kind of the long and short at high speed of what we're up to.
Is that going down in Colorado?
Costa Rica, deep South Costa Rica on the Osa Peninsula. The retreat facilities right on the ocean, so you can walk right from your room into the ocean, like pretty quick, super quiet, monkeys everywhere, all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, I will not be going. Kyle will go, and we just recruited this amazing psychologist who's been an instructor for us for a while. Dr. Mike Sapiro out of Boise, does a lot of work with special forces and police in the psychedelic space. So really excited to have him on board to like kind of bridge that gap that you don't usually see bridged in psychedelia.
Have you been down there though?
I have not, man. Like I'm just doing the business and I'm sending Kyle around the world. I would be exhausted if I traveled as much as we have him traveling. He just got back from Portugal. Yeah. And Portugal, Miami. We just ran an event in Denver last weekend. It's been a world tour for him, for sure.
You keep sending him around the world. He's not going to want to leave New Jersey because he's never there.
That's a good point. All right, more Colorado events coming soon.
So before you brought up that, at some of the trainings and some of the retreats, there are no psychedelics. Do you guys get any pushback with people coming or have any problems with people bringing stuff in? I know you guys want to stay on the up and up and you really can't do stuff like that.
I love that you know that about me. So yeah, like with the business, I can't take risks like that. There's a lot of people with smaller businesses and they're comfortable taking pretty substantial legal risks. So no, we haven't actually had any problems with people bringing substance to retreats, which is amazing. I would have expected it, honestly. And like, I had to make the penalties kind of high. I'm like, guys, really, please don't bring it. You put everybody at risk. You put us at risk. Don't bring that stuff. In terms of pushback, a little, honestly. So we started our last cohort, and the intent was that we were going to run our breathwork retreats and everything was going to be fine there. And turns out like the students were just not okay with it. We ran a few cannabis and psychedelic events in the past, and those worked really well, but we didn't for this past year. We're probably going to bring those back for the next round because it's more accessible to do that stuff domestically. But when we're doing stuff in, Netherlands, Jamaica, or Costa Rica, something like that, where we can play with some legal edges, people really do love that. I think what happens though sometimes is people will come to our breathwork retreats and say, okay, I actually get it now, and breathwork should be mandatory, like at the start of your Vital kind of training in our program. And like, I think what it shows, and I think we got into this last time we chatted years ago, would that have been early? I don't even know. When was
early
COVID?
February 2020, I think it was.
2020. Good grief. Yeah. I think probably what I mentioned was that holotropic breathwork and similar Groff-oriented breathwork methods can make experiences happen that are as intense as very large ayahuasca or LSD sessions. So, there's something there about empowering the individual. Like, this power is in you. It's not necessarily in the fancy things you buy, which is big. Because, if people have to keep reaching outside of themselves to make themselves whole, that's not really great. But if they realize there's healing potential in them, maybe they move forward, right? It's kind of like meditating versus like, this is a shitty analogy, but I'll say it, like ice bath, like it's the ice bath doing something to you is kind of how people would think about it, versus it's just the way my body actually responds to substantial cold. Like, your body's really doing it. You're just creating the environment for it. So you kind of like confuse the cause and source a little bit. And just knowing that like helps people in so many ways, that they're the real source. You know what I mean?
Are you guys specifically using like the holotropic stuff and the stuff that like the Groff methods and those sorts of things? 'Cause Jimmy and I have had some other people on, and they push back on that sort of
Hyperventilation.
hyperventilation, holotropic type stuff, and they're talking more about like more like deep meditative breath work sort of stuff. So is it across the gamut, or do you guys hone in on
We do all
Groff
sorts
stuff?
of stuff.
Yeah.
Groff is our primary focus for breath work. We do have psychedelics at some of our trainings for sure. Um, so breath work is an interesting term. It covers so many practices. Do y'all read like James Nestor's Breathe?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like pretty decent book, but like, kind of a troll to go to the holotropic breathwork workshop and then just leave early and drink beers in your car. Like, come on, dude. Like give it the college try. Um, but everything else in the book was really solid. I thought he did a good job. But it's like, what are we trying to do? And the Groff method is trying to do a really specific thing. I think it's pretty clear that it's not for everybody. Like if somebody has like, they're afraid to even close their eyes when they're near people. Like that's a trauma response that people can get. Like maybe holotropic breathwork isn't for you yet. You know what I mean? Maybe there's something that would come first. It can make things really big. If someone has a lot of trauma, you could also, allegedly re-traumatize yourself, though I think there's a lot of nuance and shades of gray there that need to be fleshed out. It's kind of a little bit too cheap of a statement, honestly. But what it does is the same thing as psychedelics. It makes the subconscious available to you to work with. And then you could theoretically work out issues that you wouldn't be able to consciously or slowly, right? Like in the meditation frame, you're trying to still the mind and hope that things heal, as opposed to like directly confronting them. But direct confrontation can happen in things in these meditation methods too. It's like I heard someone say recently, like psychedelics are like really fast meditation practices. It's like, okay, let me sit on the mat and Zen, can lose my shit for 20 years, 30 years. Maybe I'll grow. Or like, let's take a bunch of LSD after a bunch of meditation for a couple of weeks. And then you might, have some very interesting insight that you wouldn't have if you were just purely meditating. So there's so many angles, right? Because you can hit like the polyvagal theory stuff, like vagus nerve. How do I make it healthier? Heart rate variability. How do I improve that through breath work? Like there's all sorts of things that you can address with breath work and meditation. It's just, what are you going for and why and how do you think is best for you? But I'd love, like, do you remember anything specific about people pushing back on Groff method breath work?
Well, it was actually someone who was like a Nestor coach. He's like kind of, I guess you would say, maybe a Nestor disciple. He's coming from that.
Method.
Yeah, I guess there's a certification course.
He he said that, so he was super into the Wim Hof. He's actually a certified Wim Hof instructor at one point, and they were doing some cold therapy and they were doing some breath work out in the snow, and his hands went numb for a long time, and I think he might have got some nerve damage or something, and he was pushing hard. And now I can send you offline. He posts videos kind of just like bashing on all that stuff, and I think he has some good information, but Rich and I have come to the conclusion, I've come to the conclusion, is like anyone who's too far in one camp, maybe don't listen to them. And I've come to the conclusion too that if it means me smoking cannabis all day or doing 2 or 3 rounds of some holotropic / Wim Hof, whatever you want to call it, and that gets me where I need to be, I'd rather do that than depend on cannabis. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I have better highs sometimes too.
Well,
Yeah.
so it's funny you say that, because we talked to another gentleman, Rob Earth, and he had some times where he was smoking heavy in cannabis, but he's super into Kundalini and Kriya Yoga. and he said the weed would act, or marijuana would actually bring him down from his pranayama high and that breath work high. And I noticed that as well too. It's not the same.
Very different. Yeah. So in terms of like the frostbite thing you mentioned, nerve damage from Wim Hof, like I actually include that kind of warning. Like I say, people shouldn't be doing holotropic breath work at home alone. Like it's something you go to a workshop and then you get some training if you want to facilitate. Wim Hof, like it's a pretty easy practice to learn and do at home. That said, people have died doing a Wim Hof method, right? People do the cold water immersion. They'll take showers at home, cold showers at home alone, hit their head, drown, or freeze. Like it's not risk free. But that said, it's the method I suggest people do if they're interested in like an interesting way to help their body. And then in holotropic breath work, assuming you follow all the rules in a session, like the biggest risk is you pass out. And like when you pass out, the biggest risk is you hit your head. And if you're laying down and following the rules, that should be not that big of a deal, right? So, in terms of like risks, that's how I think about it. In terms of re-traumatization or making things a little too big, like I think anything from Kundalini yoga to Wim Hof could trigger that. There's this book, author is Gopi Krishna. I think the book was called Kundalini, and he was a guy that was just doing yoga and all of a sudden had a Kundalini awakening and his body felt like it was on fire for a long time and he had to figure out what to do. And that's a situation like yoga can make that happen. People are hospitalized after meditation retreats, or in the middle, right? Vipassana meditation, for instance, is pretty intense. So like what's safe, like clearly not driving on I-70. But like what is
Ever.
What is safety? Like we got to really reframe this question and yeah, like be flexible about tools and methods, right? We don't know anything at this point in the game. Like leaning on 2 studies you read in Men's Health, like what does that really get you? You know what I mean? Like, and that's how a lot of people are operating these days.
Yeah. And I always find a red flag is when you're focusing on sort of talking negatively about what other people are doing instead of just promoting what you're doing. That's kind of like, all right, I'm a little suspect of like, why do we have to be negative about what other people are doing and not just focus on what you're doing and how beneficial that has been to you or to your client? So that was my red flag with this particular individual.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Like it's a big topic, right? And we see this in psychedelia, we see it in yoga, we see it in the breathwork world. Like Kundalini yoga is wild. Have you guys ever tried it?
Yeah.
I never have, but I've watched it a bunch and I've tried a bunch of the breathwork techniques in there. It's intense. I was hanging out with somebody who used to work with where was it? A military brig. She was a therapist, I think, there. And we're talking about Kundalini yoga in the military brig, it's the kind of prison you want to go to. Like you don't want to go to regular jail. If you got to go to jail, you might as well be enlisted. Have to go to like army jail and like, your own showers and all that. So like Kundalini yoga being like yoga for addicts because you can still get high and it's healthy for you. And you shouldn't go too far. That said, people do go off the deep end sometimes with this stuff.
Have you witnessed anything like that or experienced any issues of your own doing holotropic breath work?
I think whenever you're doing deep inner work, things can get turbulent for a while. And that's kind of part of growth, right? Like imagine, like you guys are big time runners, right? Is that your kind of primary jam?
Me, yeah.
So like, if it wasn't a shit show once in a while, like, was there really growth? You know what I mean? Like, it kind of has to be hard once in a while. Otherwise, like, old things need to die for new things to get some space, to get some traction. So like, it can be a little tumultuous when you try to quit coffee or whatever somebody's trying to quit, right? I don't love quitting coffee. I've done it a few times. It's not my favorite and it always sucks. But there's usually reasons I need to do it. yeah, like sometimes I'll be like wildly emotional for a bunch of days, or like, really raw. Um, I've seen other people have really hard times, like, a lot of crying, a lot of like uncertainty, desperation. But that's kind of the point in the Groff therapies, is to make those things really big so that you can be with that and resolve it in a safe container, as opposed to like resolving it and dealing with it in your own life on your own. Making it a sort of team sport is really important. Like, we're all descendants of successful tribes here, and this whole nuclear family thing, like single apartment in the middle of a big city, like that stuff is so far from what we're evolved to be, doing, um, that it makes us ill. And so like we need to be examining this stuff in a safe group container often. I'm a little dubious of like uh psychotherapy as such, with psychedelics being like the perfect solution. I think they're going to help a bunch, but like I think we need to be revisioning systems everywhere, like how we actually do the business of doing life here in the world, and that'll get people a lot better, I think. But that's a pretty ambitious statement, right?
So you bring up being a little dubious with psychedelics and some, mental therapy and stuff like that. And since the last time we've talked, stuff has been decriminalized and, recreation as far as cannabis in states. And you see a lot of practitioners offering assistance with people, maybe practitioners that aren't that experienced, but they see it sexy. In the lane you guys are in, what have you seen the downfalls of stuff kind of just being opened up and anyone being able to do this stuff willy-nilly? We know you guys have practitioner courses to kind of help people, but what do you guys kind of hear from coming in?
I hear good and bad. I hear good and bad for sure. So I'm when I said dubious, I mean, like, it's not the A+ gold star, we're all done kind of solution. That said, I think, MDMA psychotherapy is going to be amazing for the world. No doubt. PTSD, the data is like really clear that PTSD is largely curable now, which is amazing. And in terms of what's going on in Colorado, it's getting really territorial, which is one thing I think is going on, and not super fun to watch or be a part of. Like, there's a lot of kind of mischaracterization of what people are up to. And that's, not enjoyable for me. What I do love is how people are getting access to mushrooms effectively for free now. So get this, the bulk price of mushrooms in Southern California right now is $200 a pound.
Oh,
Yeah, right. Which is 10/8, so like a little over an ounce, but you're getting a pound. Kind of like
wow.
thinking, in terms of like traditional pricing. It's pretty nuts. So, um, was that like 1.2 ounces or something silly? So, prices are going down like crazy with mushrooms. Um, People are experimenting more. People are making more churches. People are, organizing in all sorts of interesting and novel ways. I love that kind of stuff because, like, these things have been unfairly suppressed for so long that we need to come back. We need to really, find our way back to including this stuff in culture and medicine and elsewhere. So, I have seen people get hurt. I've had people call me about abuse complaints somewhat regularly. I don't love that. I find that really uncomfortable that I'm the psychedelic police. Back when we were chatting for the last recording, that's when I was getting hit up all the time by people who were having, issues, ethical issues and otherwise. And it's not fun. There are people that are opening up their, big can of worms inside them with very inexperienced people. And I think that's dangerous. Um, One of the biggest issues is sexual misconduct in these spaces. And I don't know the solution. I would say, having 2 video cameras in the room for your session, maybe BYO video camera if you're the client. And if both cameras fail during the session, something might have been up. Something might have been up. And I did some sessions in Jamaica a few years back, and we found, the only way I found safe was doing it with video camera in the room with me and the client, because it's really untenable to pay for two therapists in the room at the same time, which is like what the MAPS model is all about. But even that's not perfect, right? It's getting closer to perfect, but it's certainly not all the way there. So yeah, what's to be done there? I don't know. We need to really think about that more and more as a community. Because things are decriminalized, we can actually share more about what happened in sessions. Before, the cops would say, "Oh, you were doing a criminal act with another person and they hurt you. Like, whatever, go away." I don't think that's very fair. If you look at the untested rape kit numbers in America, it's just extraordinary. So like that's a leading example of how little police generally care about sexual assault. And when we're doing crimes like psychedelics, like they care less somehow. So now that things are decriminalized, they can pay more attention to the actual, offenses that are in place. Hopefully. I haven't heard of anything good like that yet. One thing that drives me a little nuts is religions coming up and popping up and not being all the way truthful about what risks congregants and workers are exposed to. For instance, one of my friends was arrested as part of a church in Denver, and it was really ugly. And everybody was looking at a lot of time, and thankfully, Prop 122 got voted in, and these 4 psychedelics were decriminalized, and the case was dismissed. But he was looking at a lot of time, and what was not right was the leader of the church pretty much telling everybody, "Oh yeah, we have all the paperwork, we're all good, like we're going to be safe," and nobody thought they were taking risks when in fact they got raided by the feds. And there's plenty of risks.
Oh man.
Right. And there's this newish organization. Have you heard of this? The Church of Silomethoxin.
No.
So it's super crazy. So they they put 5-MeO DMT in the growth material for mushrooms.
Oh, I have heard about this.
Right. Alleging there's a new molecule that's made, silomethoxin. It's never been proven in a lab to be manufactured this way. There's been a number of labs that have tested their samples, and nothing has come back. I have people that go and do these sessions in my network, and they said, "Oh, it's definitely different. It's definitely not just mushrooms." But placebo is huge with psychedelics. So their whole thing was founded on like some sort of article of faith around, yes, we are making something magical here, something new and super spiritual, so we're going to make a religion. But what they would do is you get a membership, and then they mail you mushrooms. Well, sorry, mushrooms plus whatever this magical substance is that's in it. And to me, these people are guilty of like buying and transacting and purchasing mushrooms over a clear internet connection. And it's pretty easy to prove that they, broke federal law because these things are shipping across borders regularly. And the church is not really necessarily exposing that there is risk here. They're not willing to admit it because it would kind of slow down their business a bit. I love the idea of access like that. I just think we have to be really clear about what risks we're exposing our people to when we take risks like that. Like, it's one thing for you to take the risk for you, but when you're putting that risk on other people, that's when you really need to think twice about it.
Yeah. Did you see that kid in Connecticut?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What was it? $2 or $8 million? Do you remember?
8 million.
So they're full of shit
Right.
to start with. So what they do, and you guys probably know this, is they weigh the growth material that's not mushrooms.
Sure.
Similar to cannabis, they'll weigh the soil too. Charge them with the whole weight, which I don't know how that works in court. I think it's just a disgusting cabal that's trying to hurt people. Because judges are in on it too sometimes. Sometimes they're more lenient. One of my buds got, the judge and the DA went to the back room and said, "Oh, these are actually helpful. Let's just give him like 2 days in jail instead of like 10 years. Amazing. But the photos from that kid's grow. This is in Denver, by the way, before the decrim stuff went through. So that guy's grow was really impressive. He had like
Yeah.
large scale bags everywhere, awesome shelving. It looked like he had all the awesome lab gear he could need. Um, but yeah, it's a hard proposition these days to be a grower. Like I was saying, the bulk prices are so low. You have to like come up with a whole interesting business plan, like exotic strains and formulations, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. Joe, going back to the MDMA topic,
Hmm.
for PTSD and trauma and all that stuff, I'm curious what your experience has been, or maybe the people that you've talked to, because Jimmy and I have this conversation all the time about it, because um, I've dabbled, um, and there's nothing, like, I don't feel great like the next 2 or 3 days afterwards. So I'm just wondering how they're saying that this helps when, and maybe I'm just frying myself and using more than what they're given. But I've always just been like, I need like a 3 day vacation, especially now as I'm older. Um, I'm always curious how they're using that and utilizing it and getting benefits from it, because I've always found like in the moment, yeah, it's amazing and it opens you up and all this stuff. But on the back end of it, I always hear Tim Ferriss in my head saying there's no biological free lunch, because it's like I just need to be on a beach for 2 days and maybe have some good pH water or whatever.
These are recreational situations for you, Rich, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, in the clinical data, none of that's ever reported. So
Okay.
part of it's like an access issue. Like we're not getting amazing MDMA out here in the wild. Always. Sometimes we do, but it's rare. So there's an impurities thing. We're often dancing and having an amazing time and like not resting enough. Often the night after MDMA, I'm like only sleeping 3 to 5 hours.
Sure.
We probably should be doing like something like 8 after abundant amphetamine use. Carl Hart talks about this in Drug Use for Grownups. There's also a dehydration factor from all the dancing, laughing, socialization, depleting our social batteries quite a bit too. Often there's alcohol in the mix, which definitely, I've done it. I'll still do it in combo, but like it's a drain on the system to do all that. And how often are people only doing one drug? It's pretty rare. That there's mono drug use going on. So all those things are big factors, versus, being well rested, going into a therapy session with trusted therapists. You're laying down in a bed most of the time. You're going to sleep at a reasonable hour. Wildly different than going like to one of these venues we like to go to in the city, to do this kind of stuff, right? So I'm with you though. Like there's definitely a big limiting factor, I guess, on how far MDMA use can go, outside of clinical stuff. That said, I've been hearing more about this thing. I don't have any real data, and I don't know that this has been researched yet, so people should be careful with this. On the come down, there's some researchers talking about dosing with Prozac, a single dose of Prozac, and what could happen. Prozac will block the uptake of serotonin back into circulation. Like it'll just keep it in free flow a little bit. And that theoretically matches the dip in serotonin that's happening post MDMA. So it protects you a little bit from that issue. We still need to do some testing. I'm not advising anybody try this. Like let me try it first and I'll report back, everybody. I'm here to be dangerous so you could be safe. So so I'll report back on that once I find some more data. But there's, people are on the job, and then there's all these other new compounds, right? There's so many interesting new drugs that are coming and are available. And back to like the why it's helpful for people, Rich, it's the theory right now is that MDMA lowers blood flow to the amygdala, which is where our fear responses come from. So we just have less fear, so that when these kind of visions that we're suppressing in our PTSD come forward, we aren't just afraid and we can confront them in an interesting way, if that makes sense. So very
Yeah.
similar to breath work and other psychedelic work, in my opinion.
Joe, it's interesting you say this, you bring up the topic of using Prozac on the back end. I used to cross paths with this gentleman in the early 2000s at the Sound Factory in Manhattan, and that was his go-to all the time. I can't remember if he was in dental school or if he was like a medical student, but he always used to say, he's like, you always have some land. He used to call it landing gear. And he would always say, take after a night out at the Sound Factory, you take a Prozac or take a dose of Prozac, and he's like, you'll have no come down. So it's
There's so
interesting.
much wisdom in the underground, Rich. Like these people have done more MDMA than I will ever do in my life, which I'm jealous of. But they learned a lot of these tricks, and normal doctors aren't necessarily, or researchers even, aren't necessarily going to go to the ravers to find out what their situation is and how they made it work. I think there's just a lot of value there. We should be doing that.
Yeah, that's where all the research is, the experimentation.
Right. Imagine if like raving went on for another 200 years, how many tricks ravers would have. It's amazing.
It'd be amazing.
Joe, what studies are coming through now that are kind of piquing your interest, or new research that's coming through that's kind of piquing your interest?
Chronic pain stuff for sure. Trying to search my memory banks for anything else that's really amazing to me. I would say that's the most interesting stuff to me right now, because I'm kind of involved in it. So I helped found a nonprofit recently called the Psychedelics and Pain Association. It's not like you go to a club and eat acid and people hurt you. It's different. It's like you. So what we're doing is it's a different club.
You got to pay more for that.
Yeah. So
Make sure you have 2 cameras, though.
exactly. Yeah. Strong agreements, everybody. So Psychedelics and Pain Association is nonprofit, and the idea is collating all of the scientific literature from I think the first studies were in Japan and Germany. I think Germany might have been the first with mescaline, pre-World War II, treating phantom limb people, I believe, with mescaline at high doses, and interesting pain responses. And then 10 years later, maybe in Japan, 10, 20 years later, maybe in Japan, they're doing similar phantom limb pain work with LSD, which is amazing. And then there's, this National Geographic explorer in residence, Albert Lynn, who lost a limb in a freak, I think, those razors, the 4-wheel drive things you rip through the desert in. I think he flipped one of those and lost a leg, and then was working with some folks in San Diego, and they used mushrooms in combination with a few kind of neurophysical therapy exercises and became pain-free in time. So about 3 years ago, I got introduced to this gentleman, Court Wing, who had similar results as part of the NYU treatment-resistant depression research. And halfway through his first session, stuff was happening in his body. And then all of a sudden, a lot of these chronic pain things just resolved overnight. And so I'm really interested in that kind of stuff. I'm now partners with Court Wing at a pain company. We're calling it Remap Therapeutics, and getting some really interesting results. We're getting close to publishing, or getting some attention on a case that's out there. This woman was in like the most extraordinary chronic pain you'd ever heard of, and we did our kind of like 6-week coaching protocol, and had her consume some mushrooms, and she's been 15 weeks pain-free. She can drive again, use utensils again, all that kind of stuff. So, we're like resting pain state was like a machete just in the quad nonstop, just like and she just gets used to it. And what happens is depression goes up, IQ drops with chronic pain, like your affect and your like willingness or interest in doing anything just goes dramatically down. So like if we can solve a lot of chronic pain, like the world will be a lot better of a place. And our goal is something like 80% reduction in opioid prescriptions worldwide, chronic opioid prescriptions worldwide. I love opioids and I want to keep them because I get hurt quite a bit. But like, keeping somebody on them for a number of years, if we have an alternative, is not really conscionable, and we should work against that, honestly. Yeah, so that's the pain stuff is really interesting. Is there anything else? Have you guys tried those lights that flash and make you trip? There's a
No.
couple in Colorado. You can book a session. Lucia Light is one of them. I think there's a few others. Those are really interesting. So it's just straight up a white light that flashes, but you're having like very complex visual hallucinations, eyes closed, under the influence. I don't really know the utility of it yet, but I sure do find it interesting. People call it DMT visuals. I rarely get visuals, so like it's kind of weird. I don't know what the answer is there. I'm also super interested. I bet we talked about this last time. This DMTX stuff, where people are infusing DMT sometimes for weeks or hours, or hours or weeks, or hours, days, weeks. I think at this point nobody's done it for 24 hours yet. So, we need somebody with a lot of endurance who's really brave, with a good cardiac system, good lungs, and ready to go. So there's going to be like training. So Daniel McQueen in Boulder is kind of leading the charge on the non-clinical version, because there's like the psychonaut interest, like what if we can talk to these strange symbols or entities out there in hyperspace, and then like what are we if we can have interactions with those things. So like I think that's a really interesting philosophical one. Also super interesting because people might not need to taper off of psychiatric meds in the same way. So psychedelics become applicable to a broader number of people who would be contraindicated otherwise. I think that's really cool because you can kind of like turn the knob and the psychedelic goes off. Like, all right, turn this trip off with this switch. Yeah, it's probably a good overview. I can't wait for more brain imaging data. I can't wait for more stuff from Gould Dolin. She's the one that did the MDMA octopus study. Do you guys see that one?
No.
Yeah.
Turns out, Jimmy, that MDMA makes octopuses more social as well. They're really solitary creatures. So what's one of the more interesting things there is that we share the same receptor sites as octopus, is kind of the theory. And those receptor sites were there before we separated in our evolution, very likely, which that's a real kind of mind fuck, honestly. I love it that it's that weird. Yeah.
So no more ketamine dolphins. We got MDMA octopuses.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know when we're going to give dolphins drugs again. I hope not for a little while till we can't figure that thing out a little bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating with the octopus because they are such fascinating creatures, and because they live in the sea or in the ocean and stuff, it's a sea creature or whatever. But like, if a spaceship or a UFO was to come out of the sky and an octopus came out of it, you'd be like, "That's an alien." You know what I mean? It's just so crazy that they're super intelligent. Like did you ever see the video, the one that like got out of the cage at the aquarium or whatever, was like moving around, and that's wild.
There was one squirting at a light switch from its tank to turn the light off. Was annoyed that the lights were left on overnight. Amazing. Yeah. I I hate to get animal rightsy, but like octopus are one of the few animals I don't eat anymore. Yeah, it's just like too weird and too interesting. Also, I've had psychedelic experiences where they come up. It's like my most frequent recurring character in my experiences. So I'm like, I'll give you guys a break, and I don't really like the flavor all that much anyway, so it's fine.
They're like your spirit animal.
Maybe.
Right on.
Yeah, I remember doing ayahuasca ages and ages ago, and I had both hands all the way in my mouth, shut like literally all the way in my mouth, and like it was the experience of an octopus because I had four tentacles on each hand. Shaman was not impressed with my skills, so he kind of like stopped it a few times, but it's very interesting.
Wild. With the pain management and stuff with the psychedelics, have you come across anything in terms of psychedelic use and relief or alleviation of tinnitus or tinnitus? Yeah.
The way to model it is it's very similar to phantom pain signaling. So all of a sudden ear isn't able to produce data in the same way it was before, produce signal in the same way it was before, and your nervous system is kind of making up for that drop in signal, similar to like, oh, where is all this? Like, I'm not getting any signal from here anymore. Like, what's that about? So it makes stuff up and gets into a hizzy. So yeah, it's definitely something. We were in talks with a couple veteran nonprofits to see if we couldn't run some clinical, or not clinical trials. We're trying our best to keep it out of a clinical frame, more in a coaching frame, so that we can help more people. As soon as you make it clinical, it becomes radically inaccessible. So, we're trying to figure out the right way, because we want to help Ukraine. Ukraine has like 50,000 limb loss survivors now from the war. Probably more, probably more like 60 or 70 at this point, which is effed. So, how can we help those people who have limb loss and get them back to their lives? If we could do this work after they get a really good prosthetic, like, they're going to be so much happier, so much healthier. And same, like, every single Air Force pilot, people that, the stick guys and the carriers, whatever you want to call it, traffic wands, like those guys, like the amount of exposure they have to way too high. Like, you could be putting like foamies in here plus huge Mickey Mouse ear muffs and still not get out of the Army or Air Force with some disability. You're probably gonna have really aggressive tinnitus. Tinnitus, there's two ways to pronounce it. I'm not sure what the right one is, but I use tinnitus.
That's what I do. But I have it really bad, so I would.
Do you know what caused it?
Well, back to my club days, probably didn't help it. But if I had to pinpoint one particular experience, I was in elementary school, and like a dumbass, I lit off a firework in the garage with the garage door closed, and it had a very short fuse on it. And I lit it, and it blew up before I could throw it. So it was very close. And ever since then, I'm pretty sure I've had some sort of ringing in my ears.
Never thought about tracking it all the way back to my childhood explosive experiments. I think I've got a bit. It's not really aggressive for me at this point, but like, it's there every day. My partner has to have a TV on to go to sleep, like, because it's so bad, which isn't the funnest for me, but I, make sacrifices. But yeah, like, if we could resolve that for people, like, how amazing would that be? Like, people are even committing suicide over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And I noticed, I feel like I've noticed like an uptick in the volume of it, especially in the mornings, now that we're into fall and the humidity is dropping. I don't know if there's any sort of correlation with anything, but I have noticed within the last, say, month that it is quite deafening in the mornings.
Yeah, it's sad, right? Like, the way I model it, guys, is your body is organized in such a way that it prioritizes survival. Being pain-free, being in comfort is not really part of the program. So it's really expensive to run your nervous system. Your body knows, like, oh, we're not using that, let's trim that out. So eventually you've lost all sorts of stuff going into your CNS, your brain, spinal cord, etc. And your brain has to like make do with much less signal and like much less data about what's going on in the body. Like, I went in to do some kind of analysis on myself, and there was like a number of things I did not have access to, which is really interesting. For instance, the back 2/3 of my tongue were not sensing flavor whatsoever. We tested with like salt, sugar, and citrus, I believe. In time, you can actually bring that stuff back online through certain kinds of exercises. And same thing with smelling. Like, how good is your smelling acuity? I think we did something similar with like essential oils. Like, how closely can you smell it? Then there's this idea of like sound and space. Like, if a sound happens, how accurate are you pointing at it and looking? Like, sometimes it's there, but you're pointing like, like right in front of you. You're like, oh, over there. And then you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, my nervous system's hosed. And so that's like, just like lifting or exercise, you can actually get that stuff better most of the time. And psychedelics help, turns out, weirdly.
Yeah. Just don't deadlift every day.
Oh my God. Glad you remember that. Yeah, my scars are still there, but yeah, for those who don't know, I like liquefied my body lifting too much, um, and climbing too much and not knowing how to rest. Um, yeah, so don't do that. Take breaks, figure out how to rest.
So, Joe, you brought up 2016 is when you and Kyle started this endeavor, and now you were mentioning you guys have a team, and obviously you guys are an education resource, but I think a way you guys get that across is through the content you guys create. So, do you have any tips or troubleshooting that advice for other content creators or someone trying to do stuff like you guys but in different lanes?
Don't prepare too much. Get going. Learn on the fly. Be okay to get embarrassed, you know, um, and try. Um, get gear that's not way out of your price range. Like you can get a nice microphone and some headphones to be podcasting, and like costing maybe $70 used. You could get away with to have a decent podcast setup. Um, and yeah, dual purpose things like Zoom. You don't have to buy all the craziest special software. There's plenty of good options, and figure it out, figure out how to do it. Like just because it's amazing quality in terms of like audio and video doesn't mean that it's compelling content too, right? Like if you're a shit interviewer, like you're not going to be great on the microphone. So just figure out how to experiment and keep getting better. There's this NPR book that was really good called Sound Reporting, and that was really helpful for understanding how to do this kind of stuff. um I'm sure I only kept 5% of it, but like it's a good guide. um and find a niche and just dig in and figure out how to make it valuable for people, right? Like if you had Mark Bell on, I'm trying to think what's the most helpful stuff there, talking about fitness, talking about diet, like fuck yeah, amazing. Or motivation even, because he's persevered through quite a bit. um and then or let's see, like a politician in Colorado, like maybe think really carefully about what that person wants said about them and like how they want stuff positioned, but also like what's safe things that you can challenge them on, so they might still want to be your buddy if that's what you want, right? Or if you want to be a hard hitting journalist and lose friends, you're allowed to do that kind of stuff too. um we need all types. But yeah, like make it you. I think there's a Rogan line about like how there's room for everybody to have a podcast on the planet. Like not everybody's going to listen to your podcast, but maybe a couple of your friends will. Um, and then, what do you really want to do? Do you want to just read articles and comment? I know a guy that started a podcast. He was reading like, um, I don't know, very substantial, what's the term? Prospectus of stocks of publicly traded companies in the psychedelic space. And he would read them and like comment in real time, show it on screen. And like that was his podcast and people watched it and people got value out of it. It's like, who do you want to serve? Why do you want to serve them? Who do you want to be in this whole thing? Yeah, there's a lot to think about, but it's super worth it. Yeah, like I've grown so much through this process of podcasting with PT and my other podcast before that. It's just, one of the best things I've ever done for sure.
So you bring up talking to that politician or say a controversial figure or someone who might have something that you might want to talk about, but you don't know how to bring it up. Have you come across those situations, and how have you addressed those?
Not well enough is probably my answer. Like I'm working towards that, but like we've branded ourselves as like an easy interview, where if we're going to be hard on you, we're probably going to let you know ahead of time, kind of thing. Like, hey, we're going to have to talk about this hard thing that happened last year. You good with that? Great. If not, like, I don't want to just issue a video or a podcast of you having a temper tantrum and leaving, right? That's not really helpful for anybody. So that said, like understanding their motivations and interests and background more, I think is really helpful. But if you want to dig into something, like let's say say like Bernie Madoff, right? Like I'd be pretty okay asking Bernie Madoff questions, right? Um, Obama, I'd be a lot more afraid to asking the questions. Do you see Behind Two Ferns when he kind of like threatened Zach Galifianakis? That
Yeah.
was so funny. But you know, like who I'm trying to think of a scenario. But I do get confrontational. So there's this one guy, JR from MindMed, which is a biotech. I don't think he's there anymore. I think he kind of did something funny. Um, he on my show, I wanted to be saying like, okay, like great, you're a biotech, you're doing good stuff, you're bringing drugs forward. It's gonna be awesome. Can you promise, or like, how can I be comfortable with you not being my enemy in the future by putting money against drug decriminalization and legalization initiatives? And he wouldn't answer it. And he wouldn't go forward, you know? I think I had to ask it like 5 times. It's like brutal. So, you know, it depends on how you think about that person, how you feel about that person. I didn't care to be friends with people like that, you know? Like I have too many friends right now. I can't spend enough time with all my friends, and it sucks. I don't need, you know, some guy off the internet to be my buddy. And I think you just have to contextualize the relationships a little bit more. Um, you know, like consider what are the consequences of doing this. Um, you know, there's some groups out there who this is their brand, but at a certain point, nobody will talk to them anymore. You know, do you want the whole world not to recognize you and your efforts? Like probably not. So you have to find a balance in that. Yeah, and do things diplomatically. I spent a lot of time doing customer support in my past, so you know I'm pretty good at that kind of thing. But you know I do avoid the hardest stuff. So you know once in a while I'll bring it up, right? Like I was chatting with Rick Doblin about you know he was hyping the Tim Leary pilot's license model for buying legal psychedelics in the future. So what if we could just get training, have some sort of endorsement, like think like a hunting license, and then you go to a specialty store and you can buy your stuff. Um, you know, eventually you can get like the LSD, psilocybin, MDMA, and even like the heroin or steroids, you know, endorsement, and then you could buy whatever you want. Like I think we had a fun conversation there because I was like, okay, like I'm into that, Rick, but it doesn't seem like the perfect solution because there's still going to be a black market and people buying illegal drugs that are unsafe, untested, unknown quantity or purity or anything like that. And you know, if we're trying to address the fentanyl crisis head on, then we need to think more radically. So I'm willing to have conversations like that with folks. And this was in person. This wasn't on air even. Um, so you know, there's get some conviction and get some opinions too. Like if you're going to do media, and not be a straight up journalist, you should really get informed on things and have your own opinions, at least a little bit on all these topics, and like try to understand who you are and how you want to show up. Yeah, I think those are big
Thank you.
for sure.
You got any psychedelic stock tips for us?
It's a shit show. It's a shit show. I was just buying individual stocks just so I could get the memos from the companies and learn what was going on in there and share it. Um, I think I've sold just about everything. I might have one stock of one company at like $20. So I'm like, I don't know. Like these things are funny. These early industries, especially on the Canadian exchanges, are very prone to manipulation and hype cycles. To the point where some of this stuff might just be total frauds. You know, we don't know. And if you're going to invest a lot of money, probably get to know these people personally. It's not too hard. We've done a lot of interviews with a lot of these folks, and you could probably find them. But you know, if it's us, like, you know, I don't know. I think the best move for people in Colorado is to make it a team sport and found a company with like 50 people for this coming legalization. But you know, I think we're too small of fish to be playing in public markets, is my opinion.
Right on. How are, and maybe they're just riding dirty, but I've seen some companies that are selling what seems to be legitimate products. Are they just riding dirty? Is it because they're operating out of places like maybe say like Oakland or some other places where there are different legality laws?
Hmm. It's about law enforcement priority. It's about, the laws in your municipality and yeah, things like that. So people are making brands with products that aren't legal to possess. There's a lot of them, and they'll, similar to the religion stuff, they'll lie to you and tell them it's good. Um, I was where was my business partner was in Miami recently. We were doing some trainings down there for people. Went into a shop and saw mushrooms for sale. He's going like, "Yo, bro, this is super legal because it has psilocybin in it. This is legal because it has psilocybin in it." And it was like a nicely designed package. We were just in the desert in California, like the Mojave, and we saw this brand that I recognize as a functional mushroom brand, but there was very likely psilocybin in it, and the guy behind the counter had no clue what to really say. It's like, I don't know, bro. It's here. It's on the shelf. Whatever. You want it? You want it or not? And like, there's
I'll take two.
like, how discreet are we being? How where is the risk going? Like, who owns the most risk? Like, that's the kind of stuff to pay attention to there. But yeah, it's coming. I was just in where was I? Ocean Beach, San Diego the other day, and I saw like 7 different people selling mushroom related products, like chocolates and whatnot, right in this gigantic farmers market. Like, no discretion whatsoever, really. And it's not a decriminalized jurisdiction as far as I can tell. It's a very conservative place, San Diego.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine if you're having it shipped to a house, the responsibility is on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in your
There's room for
jurisdiction.
plausible deniability, but you have to structure the transaction in such a way that works. But get a lawyer. I'm no lawyer. I don't even play one on the internet. I just play a doctor on the internet.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So, final four, Joe. Are you a coffee drinker?
Yeah.
How do you brew your coffee and how do you take it?
Black. The last couple of weeks, because I'm trying to mitigate my aggressive coffee addiction, I'm using a really shitty kind of coffee pour over situation, like one of those $2 plastic cones, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Yeah. Number 4 filter. I've been using the Bustelo lately, which is somehow amazing. I don't understand it. It's delicious.
I guess it's the weaning yourself off of it isn't going well right now.
It was 3 cups yesterday, 1 cup today.
Okay.
It's
All right.
3 cups was a little too much, but yeah, I used to drink like 2 pots.
Dang. Dang.
That was awesome cardio.
Joe, do you have any daily practices or rituals that you do on a regular basis to show up as the strongest version of Joe Moore?
Hmm. Daily practices, other than working too much, not exactly. So I try my best to avoid sulking, sloth, things like that. I try not to stay in bed too long. I just, try to get at it when I can. And, make hay while the sun's up, like, and that's it. Last winter I I skied 40 something days before having a season ending accident and brain injury in January. So get after it. Yeah. So I did like crazy amount of days in October, November, December into January. And yeah, and wrapped it up. So, it's about getting after it. It's like, what do you want and go for it. And make sure you really want it too. That's kind of the practice, honestly.
Right on. Do you have a goal for a number of days this year?
I'd love to hit 100. I don't think I'm going to make it. It's too much work travel, but we'll see. I would be satisfied with 75.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a record?
100. Yeah. The year before my brain injury. Yeah. It's a broken arm plus a real smashed up brain.
Man, you do go hard.
Yeah, I try.
Did you run into
Respect.
someone or something?
So it's so bad that I don't remember the accident. I was like, on the side of the trail, hitting those little jumps. Like it was a crosswalk too. It wasn't even anything crazy. And then I took flight, and then they tell you in the ski snowboard safety stuff, know before you leap. Um, yeah, like take a look at it first. I did not look. It was a really fucked up landing, and I just like bonked the shit out of my head. Um,
Jeez.
yeah.
No
Uh,
helmet or helmet?
oh, helmet. Yeah.
Okay.
The first day I wore a helmet, guys, was like high school, and I broke it first day out. So I'm committed to wearing a helmet as much as I can.
Right on. Respect.
Joe,
Yeah.
what are you listening to right now? Music, podcasts, audiobooks? Are you reading anything?
Hmm. There's a really good book on MDMA that just came out called "I Feel Love," by a New York Times writer. That's really good. There's a couple books on relationships I'm working on. There's one called like "Becoming the One." Not like, oh, I want to be the one for somebody. It's like you're the one for you, kind of thing. Like, how do you really just kind of like own that relationship with self in an interesting way? Um, that's fun so far. It's definitely for women, so I'm like trying to have to adapt like the whole time. Um, a lot of deep house. I DJ a bunch, so I'm trying to like figure out stuff like that. I'm probably gonna have a conversation next week with a good friend and see if we can actually make an ambient album, to be used for psychedelic sessions or other situations. So yeah, that's kind of the thing right now. I was, when I was with you guys before, super addicted to fish. So that's still there, but it's in the background a little more. Um, yeah, I'm always just thinking about DJing now.
Is that a new thing?
I started DJing in high school, but like I really picked it up in the last 3, 4 years. I was doing a lot of like Zoom, COVID DJ parties,
Oh,
DJing a lot. That
sick.
was so fun. Yeah, I think I started before COVID, and then yeah, I'm just starting to get back at it like in a bigger way. DJ'd at Burning Man the last couple of years. That was really fun.
All right. All right. Were you there this year for the
Oh yeah,
Mud
that was the
Fest?
best. That was the best.
So you made it out alive,
Oh
obviously.
yeah, like only one guy died. Wasn't even from the mud. It was from a generator accident.
So just like we asked about the creator stuff, I
Mhm.
have a lifelong goal of learning how to DJ.
Ah,
I've loved house music for a very, very, very long time, and um, I would love to learn how to do it. Do you have any tips other than just do it?
oh, let's see. Um, don't get every song in the world. Organize organize your music in terms of like, you know, you're gonna play an hour set somewhere. Make sure you have about 2 hours of music that you think might work. Um, there's this really great tool called Mixed in Key that you can actually analyze your software and say, okay, these things actually would flow together in terms of key. Great. So now you know how to do that. And then there's a new tool, a new Pioneer device that just came out that effectively auto mixes for you. You wouldn't even need to like learn how to do it, the hard stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a couple like classes online. There's like endless YouTube videos and Instagram stuff. I'm on like 10 Instagram DJ accounts now. Just give me tips all the time. And same thing. I'll just like watch YouTubes of like, oh, check out this new transition, or this new effect. Yeah, stuff like that. And then, like if you need a gig, like offer offer to DJ some brunches or something on Sundays so you don't have to stay up super late if you're like, imagine you guys as athletes want to get to sleep at a reasonable hour most of the time. So, like do some Sunday brunches and say, hey, like first two are free, but if it goes well, let's do for X dollars, from here on out, that kind of shit. And people love DJ situations for sure.
Yeah. Are you like a band creating a set list? Or like you said, you just have maybe like 2 hours of music that you might want to pull from and you're maybe like feeding off the vibe more.
I would do a little bit of both. Like
Yeah.
have the playlist, but like if you want to modify from the playlist, do that too. But like have double the time on hand for your set for sure. Yeah.
And what DJ are you vibing with the most these days?
It's just, I feel bad saying online, but it's so fucking funny to me. This singer house guy called Dances with White Girls. It's like Dances with
Yeah.
Wolves, but Dances with White
Mhm.
Girls. So fucking funny, so good. There's another guy, N2N, just the letter N, number two N. Amazing. And who else? Oh, there's so many good ones. Ski tour is super fun. Um, oh gosh, my brain's broken. Uh, but infected mushroom always amazing. Spangle always amazing. I missed the Spangle shows recently to do a desert party in the Mojave. Thought it was fair, but yeah. Gigamesh has some really fun ones. Yuksek, Yuksek has some really fun ones too. Yeah, I kind of like identify as disco, French house, and Afrobeat. So I'll pull things like Fela Kuti, and like psychedelic African music from 70s through the 80s, which is really interesting stuff, musically complex. And they had acid and we're doing weird stuff with synthesizers and guitars. Like it's really, really neat. And somehow I can make it work. Yeah. I'm realizing that if I was a straight house DJ, my job would be way easier because the songs are actually designed to be mixed.
Right.
And I've been fighting an uphill battle. So I'm actually working on doing straight deep house sets and house sets in the
Nice.
near future, and like new disco stuff like that.
Keep me posted. I'd love to check them out.
For sure. I'd check out this lady, Eartha Harris, Eartha Harris. She's doing some really fun, they call it like dark disco or like house, and then psy ambient, kind of like Spangle a little bit too. It's really beautiful. Yeah, I'm really liking her stuff as well.
Okay. Diplo, yay or nay?
We're working on getting him on the show. What I found out is he has all sorts of music that I did not know was him that I used to listen to, like Major Lazer. Had no clue. And did you catch that he ran a marathon on 5 hits? Was it 4 or 5 hits of acid?
Yeah, we're working on trying to get him too.
We're gonna try to get a race between him and I. I think that was probably micro doses, but I'll take his word for it.
5 hits. I don't know how you're holding it together. I know people do long distance on LSD all the time, but it's like how much quantity? You know what I mean?
I think at least for me, once you get above like 100 micrograms, it maybe it's a little bit easier on the road, but in the trails out in the woods, it gets a little dicey going up and down mountains over that for me personally.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there's a range, right? Like the X Games people are all like a lot of them are using and competing on. A lot of fighters are competing well under the influence. It's crazy. But people are doing it and having success. Like who am I to really critique?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know them by their success.
That's right.
Yeah.
Joe, last one.
Sure is successful.
Yes, he is. I've been digging his live sets lately that he's been putting up on YouTube. It's just kind of like that mix of like new stuff, old stuff, throwback, and just bumps. It bumps.
Say what you will. It's so fun.
Have you checked out his LSD project?
No. Is he doing like?
It's like a super group. No, it's like a super group. It's like him and like maybe 2 or 3 other people, and it's called LSD.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Thanks for the tip.
Yeah. Joe, last one. Do you have a guilty pleasure or guilty pleasures?
Yeah, for sure. Lots of them. Coffee's one of them. Guilty pleasure. It's so weird because I don't really relate to guilt anymore in a normal way. At a certain point, it breaks. I'll eat a shitload of cookies if they're in the house sometimes, like stoned or not stoned, doesn't matter. Edibles nightly, and yeah, that's a little iffy. Edibles nightly for bed. I wish I didn't do that. And I don't read nearly enough. I work too much and I can't read enough. So audiobooks are how I get by. That's probably the worst one and best one. At least I have an option to keep learning.
Yeah.
Stop. And stay fit, fit-ish. Not where I want to be, but working towards the direction of where you want to be.
Look in the direction you want to go, not the direction you're going.
If it wasn't for audiobooks, I would never read.
I just bought a book light so I can read in bed easier, not on a Kindle. Yeah, just like New York Times Wirecutter had like this list. I was like, all right, $12, fine, whatever. And it goes yellow, so you don't get the extra blue light.
Nice.
Great.
Right on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. It was awesome talking to you again. Always a pleasure, and I love the insight you bring.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Super fun. Glad we could pull it off so quick.
Yeah, no doubt. Good turnaround. Honor and pleasure, Joe. Thank you so much for your time. It was great talking with you and getting a little insight into some other things other than just this work you do with psychedelics today.
Thanks, guys. And hope we can do it again.
Absolutely.